In the last 10 years, documentaries have taken a huge leap forward in the production value and the overall storytelling. I mean, think about it. We went from boring PBS talking headpieces to full-blown productions that feel like you're watching a real-life movie. And there's a few things that documentaries on Netflix do that hook their audience and keep us coming back for more and more. And that is what we're going to talk about today. How to take your boring interviews and turn them into a documentary that you would see on Netflix. But before we get into this video, I just want to let you guys know that we are doing a giveaway for a Comica wireless microphone, and all you have to do to be eligible to win one of these is like and subscribe to the channel and comment down below, "Can you hear me now?" And you will be eligible to win this microphone, no strings attached, completely for free. So let's just take a second and start by talking about a few documentaries that are on Netflix right now that, in my opinion, have definitely pushed the craft of documentary filmmaking forward. The documentaries that I'm talking about are Last Chance U, Wormwood, and Formula One Drive to Survive. Last Chance U is by far one of the best docuseries I have ever seen. Each season follows a specific football team. Throughout their season, they follow them and document the characters' lives and the progression of the team. The premise itself is a great idea. It sets the stage for a lot of drama and character development. And one thing that this series does really well is making you feel like you're in the room with these athletes. It makes you feel like you're actually watching a real life movie. But at the same time, they do a great job in cutting away to these beautiful cinematic B-roll shots that doesn't feel forced or too overly produced. And Formula One Drive to Survive is very similar. They have these real moments where you feel like you're really getting to understand and know this character, but at the same time, they have this really awesome cinematic B-roll that keeps the viewer engaged. Now, to use as an example, we're gonna take a look at my short documentary, Unbroken. It's about an MMA fighter who is on the road to redemption. And just to let you guys in on a little secret, I followed a lot of the same tricks and formulas that these Netflix documentaries use in order to hook my audience and really capture their attention. And if you follow these formulas, or at the very least pay attention to them, you're gonna be able to take a lot of knowledge and things that they do and be able to implement that into your documentary. One of the biggest things that I learned from watching some of the best documentaries, and especially the ones that I've mentioned earlier, is taking that first intro and that hook and being able to get your viewer to buy in. And what do I mean by buying in? I mean by you hit them with something so profound or intriguing that it forces them to want to know more. And that was something that I really wanted to accomplish with this short documentary, is that first 15 to 30 seconds, I wanted a hook that felt dramatic right off the bat. That way the viewers know that this is not just going to be a talking headpiece. This is going to be a cinematic, hard-hitting documentary that's going to be a banger from start to finish. So let's just take a second and watch the first 15 seconds of my short documentary.
I spent my whole life fighting. I grew up in a very poor country. We gotta fight our government, we gotta fight to eat, we have to fight for our life.
Now, right within that first 15 seconds, we've established that this character has dealt with extreme adversity, and we've shown this in a very cinematic way. And this was important for a few reasons, because I wanted the audience to understand and have a baseline knowledge of this is the type of person that has come from a really hard upbringing and a really hard life. And you know that they're not prone to giving up. They have this built-in resilience because of what they've gone through. Now, just from an editing standpoint, we kind of bring you into this story a little bit slow, and we let our character make this initial statement, but then right away we smack you right in the mouth with all of this imagery and really intense sound design to kind of drive this cinematic feeling home. So when you guys are thinking about the first 15 to 30 seconds of your documentary, I highly suggest that that part is really thought out and it's planned out, and you have a good understanding of how you're going to be able to hook your audience. What is your audience going to want to see? How are you going to get this emotion and drive this emotion out of them when they're viewing this, first 15 seconds? Because they're going to make that decision whether they want to keep watching and listen to what you got to say in your story, or they're going to watch something else. Because the truth is that there's so much content out there. Why should they sit down and invest in you for more than 15 to 30 seconds if you're not hitting them right in the mouth right away? B-roll is a huge part of creating this cinematic story, and there are a lot of ways that you can go about doing this. I like to break B-roll down into two different categories. Category number one is what I like to call cinematic B-roll, and this is where I like to have a full-on production planned out with the intention of making it look as cinematic and as pretty as possible. Now, this should go without saying, but you still want it to be relevant to the story that you're trying to tell. You don't want just aimless cinematic B-roll just for the sake of making it look pretty. You want to be able to visually have a representation of what is being said or stated in your documentary. For example, in my documentary, we took a whole day of just capturing cinematic B-roll training footage where we would set up lights and plan out certain actions just to capture for the edit. Then you have the other type of B-roll, which I like to call coverage B-roll. And these are just things like detail shots to cover up the cuts in the dialogue of your interview or verite footage. And a great example of this is if you are capturing someone in a car. You're obviously filming them talking and you're asking them questions, but if you want to make this scene a little bit more interesting, you want to have different things to cut to. So you want to get B-roll outside the car of what's passing you during the drive. You want to get a close-up shot of your subject's hand on the wheel. You want to get a close-up shot of the dashboard or maybe the clock on the stereo. All these little things help you embellish your story and also could help you cover up some of the cuts in the dialogue. You might not have a situation where everything that they say is exactly what you want in there. You might want to cut that up a bit, and the only way to cover that up and make it look professional is if you have B-roll to kind of fill in those gaps of where you're cutting the dialogue. Both types of B-roll are extremely important, and while you have the cinematic B-roll really planned out and maybe you even have it storyboarded, the coverage B-roll, while you can plan that stuff out, it might be a situation where you can't really plan it out. Maybe they said something in the moment and you gotta kind of look around and see how you can capture that B-roll on the fly to be able to better tell that story. And as you get better as a documentary filmmaker, you'll be able to interview somebody and be able to say like, okay, they said X, Y, and Z, I gotta make sure that I capture this before we leave. And another thing that's very important while you're shooting B-roll, and what I found extremely helpful, is I always think of it as a wide, medium, and close-up. I'll get a really wide shot of my subject, I'll get a little bit tighter of a shot, and then I'll get really close detail shots because all of them will have a place in your edit. If you watch some of these original Netflix documentaries, you'll notice that they never hang on a feeling or a subject or even an environment too long. One very important thing to think about and pay attention to is pacing and shot diversity. Let's come back to my documentary, for example. A lot of this was interview based. So to keep up the pacing and for you to feel like things are constantly changing and evolving, and it's not hanging on one environment or feeling too long. Right in the middle of the documentary, I had verite footage of the fighter sparring and talking to his coach. And what this does is it helps break up the monotony of just interview B-roll. You don't want to have that over and over and over again, and no matter how good that is, it's going to get stale. The reason why I had this right in the middle is because it gave good separation between too much of the interview and B-roll and then a stopping point, and all of a sudden it feels like we had a nice refreshing change of pace. Now you have dialogue between two people in an actual environment that is uncontrolled. It's not an interview. It doesn't feel formal. It just feels like you're a fly on the wall watching this happen and watching this relationship and the day unfold. So a good idea when you're planning out your documentary or even your edit, it's good to have separation of the different emotions and the different style of filmmaking. You know, you can go from interview to B-roll, but then throw in some verite footage, throw in something that feels like you're just kind of following them around. And that's something that the best editors know how to do. They know how to separate feelings and certain moments in a storyline to make you feel like the story is moving forward and not dragging on. And another great tip is don't think that you have to do all of your interviews in a formal sit-down manner. You could break it up by jumping in the car with them, asking them questions, or maybe even going to the beach or somewhere out in nature and just following them around and asking them these questions. And even though it's an interview, it stops feeling like the same sit-down interview that you've been doing. It starts to feel a little bit more like you're just following around in their life and in their day-to-day, and it just so happens that you're getting this information and this dialogue out of them while they're doing something, and that also might open up the story for a whole new realm of possibility. So don't be so stuck on the traditional, interview and B-roll, or you have to sit down and ask them these questions. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about making your documentary, and that's what these Netflix documentaries do to hook us in. They'll jump in the car with them, they'll go to their friend's house and ask them questions and have the dialogue back and forth between them and their friend or their family member. And that's what keeps the pacing alive in their documentaries. Now, when you're watching these Netflix documentaries, and especially the ones that I've mentioned, they have a great way of making you feel like you know the character and you start rooting for them. And that's because they are masters at character development. They know how to bring you into their story in a really exciting way and make you feel like you're really beginning to peel back the layers of this character and you're getting to know them for who they truly are. And when it comes time for their big moment and they're about to accomplish whatever it is that they've been working towards, you start to get a little bit nervous for them. Jumping back to my short documentary, And keeping in mind that this is only a 3-minute long documentary, so there's not a ton of character development that I have the opportunity to do. However, there are a few things that I wanted the audience to know. It was important to me that you had an idea of where this fighter was coming from, because that helped shape him into who he is today. And then showing that he's coming off of this devastating loss that honestly could break a lot of people. But because of his upbringing and where he's from, you can already understand that he's not the type of person that would just give up. He has this ability to persevere and the drive to succeed. So your goal as a filmmaker should always be to pull the most important information and have a general theme in mind, so you could build a character enough to let the audience have an understanding of who they are and how your character's past experiences will shape the future self that will be revealed to your audience in your documentary. The best stories do one of two things. They either close out the story and make you feel fulfilled from what you just saw, or they leave you wanting more. It is very important to have an understanding of where this story is going and how you plan on ending it. Now, I know that we're talking about a documentary and not a narrative, but I will say that if you can plan out the different possibilities and at least have an idea of how your story could end, that's going to help you so much when it comes to building your story to this point. Let's just say, for example, I was to finish the story with the fighter going into the next fight. Either one of two things are going to happen. Either he's going to win or he's going to lose. If he wins, he gets his redemption, he goes to the UFC, he does his thing, his dream comes true. That's great. If he loses, my other option is, well, close it out with, this is really how a fighter's life is. There's no certainty. It's a hard life, and it's something to respect, and it's something to admire. So you have to kind of ask yourself, what are the different outcomes and the possibilities for my ending, and how I could shape and tell this story if it ends in either one of those directions. Now, a few last tips for you guys. Whenever you're making a documentary, you should always take the time to write a script and a storyboard for your project. And on my channel, I have a ton of videos about the pre-production process for documentary filmmaking, including a really awesome script writing video that I'm gonna leave right here in the comments. And I highly suggest that you go and watch that video, because it's a really good idea of how you should plan out your documentary, but most importantly, how to structure a story for your documentary. And in my opinion, more than gear, more than really fancy B-roll shots, this is the most important aspect of the filmmaking process. And if done correctly, you're gonna save yourself a lot of time and money and be able to actually finish your films. I'd like to thank you guys for stopping in and talking about these really awesome documentaries with me. If you guys like this content and you have any other questions about documentary filmmaking or about anything in that process, drop them in the comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Deuces.